Welcome back everyone. So as I mentioned recently, I've been working on a recording project with a friend of mine, and one thing that always means a lot of is audio editing. So let's talk about it. Why do we do it? What are we trying to achieve? And how do we get through it as efficiently as possible? So when I think about audio editing, I'm really talking about two things. That's selecting takes to build the best possible performance and correcting time and pitch as necessary. And while there's a lot of information out there about the nuts and bolts of editing, pitch correction, time stretching, cutting and all of that, and an awful lot of people ready to tell you what not to do, I wanted to talk a bit about the principles of editing, how you use those tools to reach your creative goals. With editing, as with any creative process, there's never going to be a one-size-fits-all rule, so you have to think about what you're aiming to do. I tend to think about this in terms of two different roles in the arrangement: featured parts and supporting parts. With featured parts, something like a lead vocal or a guitar solo or a catchy hook, what you're aiming for is a distinctive, memorable performance. Whereas with supporting parts like bass or tambourine or a synth ostinato, you might be aiming more for consistency to give a strong framework to contextualize your featured parts. So these principles are going to affect your attitude towards take selection as well as your attitude towards time and pitch correction. Remember, when it comes to take selection, you can correct timing and pitch, but you can't correct delivery, and that goes for both supporting and featured parts. Let's say you're working on a bass track that you need to be steady and consistent. It's far better to choose a take that's slightly out of time here and there but has a very consistent attack to all of the notes than one that's all over the place performance-wise but is bang in time. Let's say your singer has given an absolute belter of a performance but it's just not quite there pitch-wise on the high notes. Sure, in an ideal world you would have taken the time to get the best possible take both technically and performance-wise, but we don't live in an ideal world. You've only got so much time for tracking. So with a part like that, you have to choose a take that tells the story best, and you can worry about the details later. And as far as those details are concerned, it's important to remember that different genres and different performers will have their own particular standards when it comes to that. For example, if you're producing a tight modern pop track or a technical death metal song, you might need everything to be bang in time, bang in tune. But if you apply those same standards to a blues track or a dreamy ambient psychedelic pop song, you're gonna suck all of the life out of it. So what we're aiming for here is not perfection, but to make the song most like itself. It needs to tell the story it's trying to tell, and using the tools at our disposal towards that goal is not cheating. So as we said, sometimes on the day you can't get the perfect takes, and that's fine. You did your best. But now we're done with recording and we need to work with what we've got. We might need to take a few shortcuts. Don't worry, we're gonna be okay. With supporting parts, you can absolutely get away with a bit of judicious copy and pasting here and there. Let's say you realize that your second verse has a particular chord that you never quite got a clean take of, but there's one in the first verse. You can absolutely get away with a bit of copy and pasting here, on two conditions. Firstly, it's going to be a bit more noticeable if the articulation of that first chord is really distinctive. So when that exact same articulation pops up again a verse later, your listener might get a little bit of deja vu. Likewise, if you're duplicating something that happened really recently, let's say you're duplicating the previous bar of guitar chords, your listener might pick up on that, so be a little bit careful there. That said, with supporting parts you can absolutely get away with more than with featured parts, especially in a dense arrangement. Nobody's going to notice a shortcut that you took on the third layer of rhythm guitar. Also bear in mind that some parts in your arrangement might go from being featured parts to being supporting parts, or vice versa. Let's say your rhythm guitar has a bar on its own in the spotlight. You should make sure that you give that part the attention it needs, because now it's a featured part. Now, as we said earlier, there are some situations, and in particular some genres, where you'd want to take a much lighter touch and be very careful about overcorrecting. Let's say you're editing a loose, shuffly blues drum track. You don't want to snap everything to the grid and iron all of the life out of it, but you might need to tweak things here and there if that distinctive groove is being thrown off. So it's really important in those situations to listen carefully to your tracks and understand the idiosyncrasies built into them. Let's say your shuffly blues drummer always places their snare hits a little bit behind the beat. If there's one bar where the timing has gone way off and you need to correct it, make sure you correct it in a way that's sympathetic to their style. Preserve that groovy behind the beat feel when you correct. And even if you are going for a high level of consistency on a very repetitive part, I would recommend not snapping every single note to the grid. Maybe just place stretch markers on the strong beats of the bar, let's say the 1 and the 3, and let those subdivisions be a little bit looser and more human, just to keep a little bit of life in there. Of course, if the vibe of your song is all about absolute robotic consistency, by all means go for it. Trust your intentions. And lastly, it's really important to have some attention to detail when it comes to the space between the notes. Vocals are a great example of this. Sometimes the breath before a line can be really distracting, whereas other times it can really help sell the emotional mood of that line. So be careful with your breaths. Sometimes they're better taken out, sometimes better left in. If you do leave them in though, make sure that you don't split between takes in the middle of the breath, because it can sound really weird and unnatural. And the same goes for all of those distinctive mechanical noises of an instrument being played. Guitar's string squeak, or the thump of a piano's hammers being removed from the strings. Okay, so lastly we're going to get into a little bit of technical stuff. I'm going to be coming at this from the perspective of Reaper because that's the DAW I use, but a lot of these concepts might be transferable to other DAWs. Here's how I edit quickly. Let's say I'm editing vocals. I'll select all of the clips on that track and then play through the song, inserting split points before each line. I've gotten quite deft at doing this, so I'll sometimes do this at 1.5 playback speed just to get through it a bit quicker. Next, I'll go through phrase by phrase and listen to each take to choose the best one. Sometimes I'll need to go back and forward a bit between phrases to make sure that the two takes mesh together. The way that I'm able to do this so quickly is that I've set up keyboard shortcuts, so I'm able to navigate from clip to clip and from take to take with one hand. I've set up the section sign, which is that weird symbol next to the 1, to be next clip, and the shift symbol sign to be previous clip. T is next take, shift T is previous take. And let's say I'm editing something like a rhythm guitar part for consistency of time. I can use tab to move to the next transient, A to place the stretch marker, and then tab to the next. Once that's done, I can select all clips on that track, right click, and do snap stretch markers to grid. Then a quick listen through to make sure that nothing sounds weird, and we're good to go. Lastly, the most important thing to remember when editing at speed is to keep your eyes on the prize. Don't forget why you're doing this and start overcorrecting just out of force of habit. And also make sure you remember to take breaks, otherwise your brain starts to turn to mush and you stop actually listening to what you're editing. Thank you for joining me for another one of these technical ones. I've been quite enjoying talking shop, so there's going to be more where this came from. If you want to catch those, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell icon for notifications. And if you know anyone who would benefit from seeing these videos, I'd love for you to share this with them. Okay, see you next time.